PinchE channel. I am your host, the PinchE, and today, guys, we're gonna be talking about Lord of the Rings deck building game. This is going to be the video talking about how to play, the different ways you can play the game, and hopefully you guys enjoy this. Again, guys, there might be things that I forget. We will keep releasing more how to play videos on this game, maybe a little bit of highlights when I play with my friends. But for now, guys, hopefully you enjoy it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back. Let's get to it right away. I don't want to waste your time. So as we can see here, you can obviously change up the way you play the game, but the game is designed to go a certain pattern. Now that pattern can be shifted. You might like certain things more than others, and you might say, you know what, I'll add more cards. Maybe you can start with more power. And basically what I want to say is, even though there's a rule book and they tell you what to do, the beauty of deck building games is that you can do whatever you want and you can add rules as you go. And this kind of reminds me when you were a kid and you just came up with your own ideas for games so spontaneously, and you would do whatever you want just to make it more fun. And obviously that always made things better, right? So looking at this, which by the way, again, guys, thank you so much to John Alonso with the mat. If you want to get more information about this custom mats, I will put the link in the description below, so you can hit up my boy John and Trifinity Custom Mats, and also they do sleeves, so just something to think about. Anyways, so there are 3 stacks of cards that you see here, okay? Now, you don't have to put them this way. You can put them somewhere else. It doesn't really matter. You're playing with a lot of people, obviously, as a deck building game, so you can put them in the middle, on the side, but you want to have access to these cards because these cards are the more primary cards that are not part of the actual deck. So for example, we have our Valor cards, right? We talked about this last time. There's different cards that do different things. This one, for example, Valor, is always going to give you +2 power, and it costs 3 to purchase. We'll talk about that here in a second. We have our pile of bosses, okay, which we always start with the boy and we always end with the big boy. That is always how it's gonna go. Everything in the middle will be randomized, right? This is the way that we have it set up for this one, but you usually want to start with this guy because he's the weakest, and you want to end with the strongest. So let me explain how this is going to work. So now your boss cards are always going to be the thing that kind of makes the game progress. So the point of the game is that you and your friends try to beat as many bosses as you can, and then either A, the game is over when all the bosses get defeated, B, if you run out of cards from the main deck, which we'll talk about right now, or I guess C, if you get bored, which I don't think you will because I love this game. The corruption cards, these are cards that, you know, will decrease your victory points at the end of the game. As you can see, there's a -1 right here, which will tell you that you have to subtract that from your actual score. Now, every single card has a cost of purchase, okay, and a victory point at the bottom left. Now, most cards have a either 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you keep going. And then the cost for purchase will vary. Corruption cards are in a different situation because these are kind of a punishment card that will only be they will only be put into your deck by an effect of another card, usually bosses or enemy cards. Now, the game begins with everybody that you're playing with a 10-card deck. Now, this 10-card deck has to be very specific. That 10-card deck needs to include 3 despair cards, which don't do anything. It's a starter card. It just kind of fills your deck with things that are useless. It has 0 victory points, and you can't buy these. And then you're gonna have 6 courage cards, which, as you can see here, it is very overall just a 1 power, and then it has 0 cost because you can't get any of these, and it has 0 victory points. Now, the reason why you want to have 3 and 6 is just kind of balances out the deck, so you don't start the first turn with a pretty big hand. Now, the last card that goes in your deck comes down to whatever leader card you have. Each leader card is going to tell you that, hey, you have to start with this 1 card. Let's get this to focus. There we go. Kind of, right? There we go. So for example, if you got the boy here, you would start with this card in your deck, which says +2 power. If there are 10 more cards in your discard pile, you can draw a card. Now, the way that I played it with my friends is we actually just grabbed random low-cost blue cards, and each of us picked one, and we put it in our deck. So our decks were actually kind of stronger at the beginning of the game than in the usual. And again, we go back to the same thing. You can adjust, and you can do whatever you want with your starting hand. It doesn't really matter. It depends on what type of game you want to have. Now, the way this works is I would shuffle my deck. Okay, I would shuffle the deck, and I would draw 5. Okay, so every single person is going to start with 10 cards. That's just how it works in the deck. And then I'm going to draw 5. So I shuffled it. I draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are going to be in my hand. My deck stays right here. So now, this is what we start with. That's actually not too bad. I have 1 power, 2 power, 3, 4 power total, because again, the spare cards don't really do anything. So that's what I have in my hand. I have 4 total power. Now the question is, what do I do with this, right? So now the game starts by shuffling the rest of the cards into one pile of just everything, right? And so the pile would be, let's just say we're gonna put it over here. Okay, we're gonna shuffle the entire deck with all the ally cards as well as the maneuver cards and the artifacts and the enemy cards. They're all gonna get shuffled into this big pile. I'm just using a small pile so I can actually explain it in the video, but you're gonna have a big stack of cards over here. Now, at the beginning of the game, 5 cards are gonna get opened up into the middle of the board. As you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, the reason why I wanted to show one of each card is to explain exactly what you're trying to do in the game. Now, obviously, right now, we ran out of cards, so at this point, the game would be over because people can't purchase any more cards. And so you would count your victory points and then see who has more, and that person would win. Right now, I don't have the whole entire stack of cards because, you know, I'm trying to explain how the game works. Now, let's talk about this. There are 5 different types of cards on the board. Now, depending on how much power you have in your hand, that is going to tell you, hey, all right, buy certain cards. Now, like we talked about before, the bottom right number is going to tell us how much that card costs. So we have a 3 cost, a 4 cost, a 2 cost, a 4 cost, and a 7 cost. So I can tell you right away, considering my hand that only has 4 power, the only cards that I can really purchase would be these 4 right here, because this card costs 7 to buy and I don't have enough. So everything in this game is based on the power that you have in your hand. Now, each card does something different. For example, the ally card here tells us that it is +2 power, and it says you can destroy a corruption card in your hand on your discard pile, which that's really good because later in the game, once you end up with a bunch of corruption cards, maybe this would be a card that can come in handy so you can destroy them and they're not part of your deck anymore. So now, the reason why the game is called a deck building game, so basically how it works is each turn, you end up with a hand of 5. My hand had a 4 power. So let's just say that I want to say, okay, I'm going to use my 4 power. This has an extra effect, but I don't have 10 cards in the discard pile, so this doesn't really matter. But I have 4 power. So every turn, I'm going to use as many cards as I can from my hand because they're all going to get discarded anyways. I have 4 power, and I decide to buy, let's just say that I want to buy our artifact, because the artifact card says, you name a non-starter card type and reveal the top card of your deck. If that is the one that you named, you get +4 power. If not, then you still get +1 power. It's a really good card if you know what your deck has, because then you can guess correctly and get that +4 power, which is good. So we're gonna add that into our deck. And now that only costs 2. So if there was another card up here that costs 2, you could buy both. So you can buy as many cards as you want, including the Valor cards over here, because if there's nothing that you can afford and you still have 3 power, having +2 power in your deck is still gonna help you. So again, now I purchased my 1 card. I don't have any more power to spend because there's nothing else that I can buy for 2. So now all my cards go into the discard pile, and then that forces me to draw another 5. Okay, so the whole entire idea of this game is that you use your 5 cards in your hand, you discard them, right? Now, and then as you go on, the cards that you purchase are going into your discard pile, which eventually, right, once I can't draw any more cards, I have to shuffle this back and put them over here. But see, now there's 6 cards in here, not 5, because I bought one. And so then the game will progress of me getting different cards that I buy from the table, right, from the front 5. And then we keep going until I start drawing cards that give me 6 power, 7 power, 8 power, and then I can beat the boss. And then I can buy the boss, and then now the boss goes into my discard pile as well, which later becomes part of my actual deck. So that's why it's called a deck building game, because we're buying cards from the actual deck and then adding them to our decks, and then we build a stronger deck so we can actually purchase more cards and then eventually win because we have the most victory points. Now, every time that somebody has enough power to beat a boss, you don't have to beat the boss, but they usually have the most victory points, so you do want to beat the boss. Now, the moment that you beat a boss, for example, if I had 8 power and I was able to defeat this, okay, now this card goes into my discard pile and we're good to go. The next card that gets revealed, in this case, the Witch King, now that has an attack, group ambush, okay? So each player reveals this hand, okay, and then each player who reveals the most courage cards destroys them all and then draws that many cards from their deck. So basically, every single time we beat a boss, the next one that comes in is gonna have a group attack. And so every single person that's playing the game is going to get affected by that attack. Sometimes you're able to block them because there's cards that say you may use this card for defense. Sometimes you can't and you have to follow up what they say. Sometimes it's discarding your entire hand. Sometimes it's destroying cards, which, by the way, if your card gets destroyed, it no longer goes into the discard pile. It gets taken away from the game. So that is very dangerous, for example, because you might get a card that is useful in your hand and is now destroyed. Now, every time that a card gets purchased from the 5 that we have opened up in the beginning, another card would be used from the deck to add, so we can always have 5. So we always want to have 5. If 4 cards got bought out, then you have to add another 4 because you always want to have 5 up in the front so people can actually buy their cards. Now, sometimes an enemy will be the card that gets opened. So let's say that we bought these 2, right, with our cards in our hand. They go into the drop pile. I draw another 5, 2, 3, 5, and then now this is my new hand, but that doesn't really matter. So now we bought 2 cards from here, so now we're gonna have to open up 2 cards. So we open the first one, which is an enemy, and that's gonna trigger an attack. We're gonna open a second one, which is just a maneuver card that has nothing to do with anything else, but our enemy card is going to tell us right now. It says put a location you control into your discard pile. So basically, if I had a location card activated in my field, I would discard it into my discard pile. So now that applies to the person that comes after me. So I bought the 2 cards, he opens up the 2 cards, he opened up an enemy card, that person gets punished. That's how it's gonna work. If it's a boss card, it affects everybody, and you can see it because it says group. This one is gonna attack the person whose turn is. So in this situation, if I was playing with my friend Landon and he was going after me, he now would have to put his location card in the discard pile, which, you know, if he had a location card, then great, good for me. And if not, then nothing would happen. So again, guys, very simple game. It's all a matter of just reading your cards. There's obviously going to be cards that are better than the others, and those are the ones that you want to buy so you can put them into your deck. You want to get rid of corruption cards with cards like, you know, ally cards that can destroy corruption cards. And again, you're just trying to build your deck the strongest you can. You know, some cards work better with others. So there are cards that say, hey, you know, if you activate this many ally cards this turn, you get an extra +3 power. Sometimes they tell you, like, you know what, discard your entire hand and draw 3. Or sometimes they'll tell you, like, if this is the first card you play for the turn, you may draw another card. So it just comes down to what the card says and you know, being able to read it and kind of, you know, use it for your advantage. Obviously, the more experienced you are with games, So if you've played Pokemon before, Dragon Ball, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, all those main brand games, you will get the hang of this game quicker than somebody that has never played a card game before. But for people that are just beginners and love Lord of the Rings, I highly recommend that you buy this game because it is going to open your eyes into a very fun game that is very productive if you ask me. It teaches you how to use cards in different ways. It's always changing because every game you have a different leader, different cards. You can change it up. You don't want to start with 10 cards, you want to start with 15 and just put a bunch of really good cards in your decks, go for it. You want to play impossible mode, go for it. You want to start with a bunch of enemies on the board, go for it. There's literally nothing wrong with this game. You can play it in any way you want. It is super fun. I highly recommend anybody to play this and everybody to even at least give it a try. I play this with my friends all the time and it's super fun. The thing that makes it more fun too, in my opinion, is that you are not trying to beat other people, really. You're trying to beat the game. You're trying to beat the bosses. And so even though sometimes, you'll have cards that say, hey, choose one person out of the whole entire group. That person doesn't draw a card, but then everybody else does. Like, you're not really hurting somebody else. And so that's also nice. So people don't get really upset when you're trying to, destroy their entire hand and then they get upset like other games, right? So very, very interesting game. There's different cards that do different things. Ally cards work well with each other. Artifacts cards work well with each other. Maneuver cards work well with each other. Locations will trigger certain actions, and they stay out for the entire game unless somebody destroys them. Like this one, it says at the end of each of your turns, you can draw an extra card. So there you go. So like this card is really good because you can have it out in your field, and at the end of the turn, every single time you can draw an extra card. So now next turn you're starting with 6 instead of 5, and that helps you get more power, which helps you defeat the bosses. Yeah, guys. I mean, to be honest, we can sit here and talk about what each card does and what their effect does, but I feel like that would take the purpose out of the game. I feel like it's better if you just buy the game, open it up, and start reading it yourself. And then the first game you might do really bad, and the second game you might be super good at the game. Again, super fun, really good to play with friends. The drawing and shuffling the deck and everything. There's a lot of luck based on this game as well. But again, we're all trying to beat the boss and have a good time. So hopefully you guys like this video, guys. Let me know if you have any more questions about this game that I didn't cover. Thank you so much for being part of the PinchE family. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Take it easy, be safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.